Welcome, everyone, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Chance Glasco about the game development scene in Brazil.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Welcome all to our live magical podcast where we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host here, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster at the Indie Game Academy, and joining me today is Chance Glasco, the CEO and director at Good Dog Studio, as well as a game development consultant. Chance, welcome to the show. What are you having for lunch here today?
I've skipped lunch. It's 2 p.m. I just started. I went down a fasting rabbit hole like last week, and so I decided to. I always thought if I fasted, I would kind of just disappear. My muscles would go away, and did some research, and so now I'm trying these like 12 to 16 hour fasts and eating within a window just to kind of see what it does, kind of health wise. It's not so much about losing weight. I'm not really trying to do that much, but. So nothing right now. I'll probably have leftovers. I made some chicken steak stir fry with squash, carrots, something else last night. So
Amazing. So you're a fellow intermittent faster. I am also an intermittent faster.
has that worked out for you? Have you found a lot of benefits?
Yeah, actually, it is definitely. I fluctuate in how religiously I
Mhm.
stick to my schedule. There's definitely times where I'm worse and times where I'm better. But for the most part, I actually really like it. It's an easy way to maintain my weight, and it's an easy way to I actually generally feel like more awake and alert. It seems
I have a visitor just showed up.
nice. We got a cat.
Yeah, you probably have had a lot of cats on this podcast, right?
We have indeed. My cat is
You
currently
should have.
passed out,
Say
but
hello.
we'll bring him up at some point.
There we go.
Who is this cat? What is this cat's name?
Her name is Baby. I didn't name her. She was my dad's cat that I inherited, so
Nice.
she's a good
We're
cat though.
definitely that's awesome. We're cat lovers here for sure.
Solid 9 out of 10, I'd say, maybe 8.5.
Beautiful. All right. So, apart from the intermittent fasting, the main thing that we like to talk about here, or the first thing we like to talk about at least, is the origin story. So, Chance, you are currently the CEO director at Good Dog Studio, and you do consulting and contracting as well. Tell us about where you are today and how you got there. Give us your origin story.
Yeah, so you want to start in my teen years? Like, we'll start there. The first time I started developing games, I think I was 14 or 15. I had a,
Hmm.
um, and well, it was whatever. I think a 386 at the time with like a 14.4 dial-up modem, and on my PC was Gorillas and Nibbles. Nibbles is Snake, and it was two games written in BASIC, and I didn't know how to program, and there weren't really any resources to learn to do it. I was living in Indian Harbor Beach, Florida, which is Brevard County near the space shuttle, NASA, and all that, SpaceX. And I went into the code and I started looking at the code. I was like, oh, this kind of makes sense. It's math and words.
Hmm.
And I did what I could to kind of reverse engineer what I was seeing. And I started making text based adventure games. The most notable being The Dentist That Took Over Compton. It was a 1990s gangster rap text adventure where you play Snoop Porky Dog, and you're a dentist that gets dropped off in Inglewood, and you're from like some rich white northeast area, and you have to collect all of your dental tools, and you encounter parody versions of 90s gangster rappers. Sadly, that game does not exist anymore, and it's maybe somewhere on a
As like
magnetic disc.
Yeah, as like so many of our favorite games or the games we work on, that's one of the problems with working in the digital space. Your art
Yeah,
evaporates at some point.
yeah. So I didn't know that I'd want to keep that, but anyways, um, I realized that I wasn't going to actually get good at making games if I didn't have a way to learn. And I discovered that there was a school about an hour away called Full Sail University. And I checked it
Hmm.
out. And they, at the time, didn't have a game development program, but they had a computer animation program, which could be films or it could be games. And so I went there. I studied for like 18 months, or no, like 15 months. It was 40 plus hours a week, accelerated associates of science. Um, and I was like, I think after I'm done studying, I'm gonna go out to California, go to Los Angeles because there's more gaming animation jobs there than anywhere. So I went out there with very little money in my '88 Honda Accord, which at the time is smaller than a modern Civic, and made it out there and had one of the worst months of my life. I think I got the only job opportunity I had was to be an extra on X Files, which
Wow.
wasn't really what I was pursuing.
Do you have a credit?
uh,
Can we look up your credit?
no, no, I actually didn't do it. I was like,
Ah,
I
dang.
didn't come here to be a background actor, um,
Hmm.
and which is I should have done it. That would have been cool. That was a great show. And I half the time I was out there for about 5 weeks. About 2 to 3 of those weeks, I was sleeping in the back of my car, parked at a Gold's Gym, because I didn't have any money. Or I had very little money, and I would roll up towels in the windows so the streetlights wouldn't keep me awake at night. And in the morning, I would go into the gym, brush my teeth, be hygienic and whatnot, and try to look for work. I failed, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going back to Orlando. I stopped in Tulsa, Oklahoma, out of all places, and that's where I was born. So I was like, I'm going to stop there. It's like it's literally in the middle of the country. I mean, if you load up Google, it used to just go right to Tulsa because that was the middle, right? And visited my mom, my grandma, aunts and uncles and whatnot. And when I was there, I found out I met this guy at this like kind of indie new wave show, and he said, I'm working at this video game company here in Tulsa. I'm like, well, there's a video game company in Tulsa. Are you serious? They're just like oil here. And so I emailed them and sent them, a couple animations that I did in school, and they were really bad. And I was like, I will come and clean your toilets if I have to for free if I can get my foot in the door, right? And that's what I did. Well, I didn't clean the toilets, but
Wow.
I showed up. I got an internship. It was like a
Mm.
month long, maybe 3 weeks, and then they hired me because I was working on Medal of Honor Allied Assault, and at the time I had no idea how big of a game this was going to be. I just knew, I had played Medal of Honor on I think PlayStation 1 or 2 or something, and was really impressed by the animations. Like, cool, they're making a PC version. So I was the first work that I ever did in a game that people have played would be if you play the D-Day landing and you see the people that are like shaking, convulsing, like the Saving Private Ryan scene.
Yeah.
Omaha Beach. I did a lot of the people that were just struggling with life, you know,
Oh man.
um, on
It's a
the beach
traumatic
there.
first
But hey,
job,
it's
Chance.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's something. Um, and then eventually they moved me on to doing the view models of first-person weapon reloads and everything, and that was a much more rewarding thing because in a
Hmm.
first-person shooter, your main character is literally just your shoulders down to your hands and whatever's in your hands. So
Hmm.
to me, I always thought, at least at the time, if you played Rainbow Six, your first-person view model didn't exist. It was an icon on the bottom right of the screen that told you what gun you had, and then a crosshair that would change sizes based on if there was a lot of spread.
Hmm.
And so to me, I was like, you know what? Like, this is always underlooked in shooters, but this is the main character. This is you. You are the main character. So I took it serious. And then we launched Medal of Honor Allied Assault. Or actually, went to E3. We won pretty much, every game of the show award we
Wow.
could almost. We had a 3-hour line to come see the Omaha Beach landing, and it dominated. And we came back, we shipped the product, and it did really well. But we had an issue: is no one liked the CEO. He fired our best producer,
Huh.
um, just someone you don't want to work with. Like a
Hmm.
less charming Michael Scott. Um, and so 22 of us, got together. At first, it was Vince Zampella, Jason, and Grant. Actually, Grant, the person that was fired, Grant got fired, and he called me on Halloween and said, "Hey, Chance, what's up?" I was like, "Hey, Grant, how's it going? What are you doing? Are you back in California? It's like, no, I'm starting a game studio. I was like, oh, like in L.A. or San Francisco? It's like, no, in Tulsa. I'm like, where are you gonna find game developers in Tulsa, Oklahoma? Like, well, you want to come over tonight? I was like, okay, sure. So I show up at him and his girlfriend's house, and it's probably about 10 or 12 people on our team, and and Grant says to Boone, who is the head animator, "Hey, have you talked to Chance yet?" It's like, "No." He's like, "Well, take him outside." So we go outside, and he's like, "Hey, so I'm starting a new game studio with Grant." I was like, "Well, who's part of it?" He's like, "Everyone inside that house." It's like, "That's almost our entire team." And so he said, "Do you want to be part of it?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was 20. I just turned 21, right? And at that point, I was just like, I want to be part of the team that I worked with. I wasn't going to be left behind, and so joined them. And 22 of us left and started Infinity Ward. And we were actually helped by EA to leave because EA didn't want to work with the CEO either. And so EA gave us our first project working on Medal of Honor Spearhead, which was the first expansion for Allied Assault. Well, EA at the time was very I mean, this still happens a lot, but they would just kind of acquire companies and put them in their large mothership in LA and just kind of mix the teams up and just destroy your team. And so a couple of months into it, they're like, "Hey, we want you guys to move to Bel Air and join Electronic Arts LA or Bel Air, whatever they called it."
Hmm.
And that was a studio of like I think close to 200 people. It was like you're just going to take
Wow.
these 22 people that just made a 90% plus rated game and just throw them as just extras on your existing team. Like, yeah. And so
So you got your
like,
first taste of the darkness of the game industry.
yes, the first taste. Um, and so we got together and we kind of pondered this. And I was actually, I was wrong. I was one of the people that said, hey, this is a great opportunity. EA's huge. They're rich. I was young and I thought that would be a good move. But the greater team said, no, let's stay together, which I was cool with. But my initial reaction was, this is a great opportunity, right? Well,
Mhm.
it's good that we stayed together. We hired a couple more people. In 15 months, we made Call of Duty 1. We obviously couldn't use anything that we did for Allied
Wow.
Assault because it was owned by EA, which is built on the Quake 3 engine, with I think the Divinity Original Sin editions, or
Hmm.
maybe that's was with COD. But anyways, we had to kind of start over from scratch, which is okay because we
Hmm.
basically had all this legacy code that we could um, kind of not have anymore because we're starting over, fix a lot of the foundational things that we messed up on with. And our deal with Activision was you give us creative freedom. You don't send your business people to look over my shoulder and tell me how to animate an M1 Grand, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and so they're like, sure, we're going to do that. We're going to let you guys stay a separate studio, your own building, and make the game you want to make, right? So Medal of Honor Allied Assault was kind of like Call of Duty Zero, it was definitely like a prequel because it was all the same people, right? Minus a few. And that came out after 15 months. No one had heard of Call of Duty. People ask like, "Oh, you make video games? What's the name of your game?" "Oh, Call of Duty." "Oh, never heard of it." Like, um, and
What a wild time period for Call
yeah,
of
and this
Duty
was
to be
still
a
like
non-known name.
yeah, and at this time, probably like only 5% were getting their news from the internet. It was like PC
Hmm.
Gamer and stuff like that. So when we came out, it wasn't that classic like whew, sales and then a dramatic drop. It was like
Hmm.
this reviews, better reviews, better reviews. Oh, multiplayer, okay, And so sales just kind of almost exponentially, not quite exponentially, almost exponentially kind of went up at the very beginning. Um, and but the problem was, is I think we sold I mean, by the time after a couple of years, maybe about close to 1 million copies, but not quite.
Wow.
And that was because we were only on PC, and we are like, man, I wish we were on, consoles at the time. And Microsoft called us, and they said, hey, we're making this new console called the Xbox Xenon. Okay, which became the 360, right?
Hmm.
And we want you guys to be a launch title. And we're like, sure, that's a great opportunity. And made Call of Duty 2, another World War II game. And because it was on Xbox 360 as a launch title, we had like a 77% attachment rate. So something like 77% of people that bought an Xbox 360 in the first 2 years bought Call of Duty 2, which is just, unless you're Super Mario Brothers included with a Nintendo or something, that's just fairly unheard of, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so by then, after Call of Duty 2, Allied Assault, Call of Duty 1, Call of Duty 2, we as a team had worked on World War II games for longer than America was in World War II. And
Wow.
anyone here doesn't know U.S.'s foreign policy, we're in wars for way too long. So as a result, we had all these ideas, these modern day ideas. Would you like helicopters, assault rifles, flashbangs, all these different things that could make gameplay more interesting. And so Jason and Vince and I think Grant went to Santa Monica to talk to Kotick and some other
Hmm.
people. Um, and I don't know if Kodak was there, but I'm assuming. Um, Talked to them, and they said, "Hey, we have all these great ideas for modern day Call of Duty," and they bust out the business charts and they're like, "Look, World War II, World War II, World War II. You know, it's never been more successful. Why would you want to do something else? Like, come on, Counter Strike. Who's going to want to play other than Counter Strike? No one's going to want to play a modern day shooter, right?" And so they came back and they told us, like, Activision said, "No, we have to make Call of Duty 3 World War II again, right?" And I don't know who it was, or maybe it's multiple people. They said, "What if we just lock them out of our studio for a couple months and like prototype a modern day level anyways?" Which is a crazy idea, and I don't recommend it, but it worked. And like literally, we only had
You
one
locked
person.
Activision out of your studio.
We locked Activision out of our studio, and ever since then, we had kind of a reputation with Activision, deserved,
Wow.
um, as just like I don't know, the don't put up with shit studio, but kind of
Wow.
egotistical at the same time, if that makes sense,
Mm.
right? And so we did that, and after a couple of months, we invited, their head producer over, a couple other people, and we're like, "Hey, ready to see the prototype?" And they get in there, and they're like, at first, obviously, they're like, "Wait a second, this doesn't look like World War II. What's going on?" And they're upset. And this is, I don't know, for anyone that's played Modern Warfare 1, it was the multiplayer map is called Shipyard. The single player version is, I forgot the name, but you fast rope at night onto a Russian ship.
Hmm.
Price throws out his cigar. You take out the drunk Russians, and you're going through the shipment containers. And so we showed this to them, and they're like, "Holy crap, this is amazing! Green light," you know.
Wow.
And so their most successful, at least I don't know if is Call of Duty still Activision's still the most successful title? Is there anything
I'll
still
look
any
it up
better?
while you talk. I'm gonna find
All
out.
right, yeah, I'm guessing it's I don't know how WoW's doing these years, but I think Call of Duty is probably still their most successful title. Was not supposed to happen because they just looked at charts and trends and marketing stuff and said that this is what you have to make, right?
Hmm.
And I think that there's definitely a huge value in that, and you should definitely spend a lot of time doing that. But you can't just look at numbers and charts and marketing research and tell a
Its
game
top
studio,
intellectual property is indeed Call of Duty.
"Okay, I figured. Thank
Hmm.
you." You can't just only look at that. You have to look at the passion of the developers. If the developers are
Hmm.
burned out on something, they're not going to make a good game.
Yeah.
We put some insane hours into that game, not because we had to crunch, but because we wanted to. It was like
Yeah.
it was our hobby and it was our job. You know.
Because Activision was trying to bust in the door with a battering ram, and you had to get it done in
Yeah.
time.
Well, they did that
And
later,
prove
which
to
is
them.
how we got respawn. So
Nice. I love that.
yeah,
It's such a what a cool story. I hadn't actually known about this story either. That the only reason we didn't wind up with a third World War II game was because you
yeah,
left them out. It's
yeah. People
incredible.
don't know that. They also don't know that Call of Duty came from Tulsa, Oklahoma, out of all places.
Yeah, I love there's a couple of things in this story that I think are so cool. One is just this is a consistent surprise on this show, which is that so many of those early games that are really at this point in time like foundational to the game industry, like Call of Duty, were pretty messy. One of my favorite stories is from Diablo, where when working on Diablo 1, it was at first a clone of XCOM, so it had turn-based combat. And the publishers saw, I think, they saw some live action game and told the Diablo team it has to be live action. And the main Diablo dev was like, "Oh my god, I can't do that. Like, what are you going to give us extra years or something?" And then he realized that there was a single variable, which was the amount of real time that each turn took, that he just made zero, and it instantly was live action, and didn't take any other time. And the moment he clicked on a skeleton and his character walked over and smashed the skeleton to pieces in real time, he was like, oh, "Okay, they're right."
So they make it
um,
turn-based, you said?
yeah, it started as turn-based. It started as an XCOM competitor, and then yeah, they changed a single variable to make it real time, and now we have the ARPG
It blows
genre.
my mind that we continually find new game mechanics. Like because
Yeah.
game mechanics aren't held back by technology, right? Like
Hmm.
there's no reason we could have totally had a bunch of roguelike or rogue kind of progression games on Nintendo, you know?
Hmm.
And so that's something that people kind of underlook sometimes is we think so much about the tech and we realized there's some genius out there that's going to come up with some simple change in the game mechanics that's going to turn everything upside down, and you're going to
Hmm.
have 100,000 copies of other
That
studios
same thing. It's happening with
using it.
Survivor likes, with the Lethal Company clones right now, with Balatro clones right now. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's sort of it's normal, but also I love that as a sentiment as well. That new mechanics are always discoverable, which just it seems like you'd run out at some point. Um, and then they always come from, it feels like, unexpected places. People are often not betting on new mechanics until they're already proven.
yeah,
Um, one more thing I want to call out here for from your story is I love the sentiment. I love the fact I didn't know about this for Call of Duty, but I've been studying, trying to figure out what ultimately leads to an incredible game, and what is the sort of magic on a team that lets you identify that an incredible game is likely, or impending. Uh, and one of the things that seems pretty universally true is basically just that the team is excited, that there's morale and momentum behind the concept. And I love that we have another piece of evidence here. Your team, part of the reason Modern Warfare is probably so incredible is because your team was, damn sure excited to make it incredible.
yeah.
Um, and that's how we got it.
And I guess
That's how we
they
got a
got
really
it.
cool game. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's after that it was Modern Warfare 2, which was I think the pinnacle of the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite COD to work on was probably Modern Warfare 1 because it was fresh and new, and then
Mm-hmm.
secondarily Modern Warfare 2. But by Modern Warfare 2, we went from being like, Call of Duty 1, one of the top three games, to the top entertainment launch, for that year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, depending on how you look at it, like basically we beat Avatar in the box offices, stuff like that. It doesn't factor in DVDs and all other stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
we went from being a top three game franchise to a top three, entertainment franchise. And so by then it wasn't like, oh, I don't know what Call of Duty is. It's like, hey, celebrities and athletes are coming to us because they're huge fans and they want to get a tour of the studio. And, I got sent over to Europe, France, England, Italy I was kind of like the one developer that they would send out to represent developers for media interviews internationally, just because most of us, I think, as I grew up doing theater and stuff, I was very comfortable just in front of cameras and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to travel a lot and like experience different countries and cultures just because of Call of Duty, which was nice. um, and yeah, I think by now I've been to like 28 other countries, and I
Wow.
wouldn't actually be in Brazil if it wasn't for Call of Duty because I was invited here originally, to be a guest speaker. So,
Wow.
um, yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's a great transition then. So let's talk about Brazil for a second. When we set up a topic for today, you told us that you would like to talk a little bit about what the game industry is like in Brazil. It is almost universally true that we're seeing a time period of a bunch of developing game industries, which is really cool. I'm actually about to head to India for IGDC for the first time. And India is one of those countries that is really like suddenly becoming an icon of game development.
for sure.
So tell us about the game industry in Brazil, and then why you're there,
Yeah, let me give
and
a
yeah.
little backstory. After you know Modern Warfare 3, there was a drama within Infinity Ward and Activision, and the
Hmm.
drama was that within the contracts of the heads of our studios, also were kind of like the usage rights of the franchise. So, for example, if they
Hmm.
wanted to make a Call of Duty board game, they have to clear it by us. If they wanted to make Call of Duty underwear, they have to clear it, with us. And we saw what they had done with Tony Hawk and Guitar Hero, and just milked the hell out of it, dried that cow down to its bones. And we didn't want that to happen with our franchise.
Hmm.
And so the only way for them to get out of the contract would be to find a way to void it. And so they sent in a bunch of lawyers to interrogate a bunch of people on the team and try to find a reason to fire the heads of the studio so that they could get out of that contract. And they didn't. They didn't find any legit reasons, and they fired them anyways. And that led to Activision getting sued successfully for over $100 million. Vince and Jason left, started Respawn, made the first Titanfall. Which imagine if Titanfall was branded Call of Duty Future, that would have dominated.
Hmm.
I mean, Titanfall, especially Titanfall 2 single player, one of the best single player experiences ever, right?
Hmm.
And so um, I was already burned out for making shooters, and so I stayed for Ghosts. I stayed at Infinity Ward to get my royalties, and left after that. You know, I had gotten invited to Rio de Janeiro to be a guest speaker at a computer graphics event. Made a lot of friends, and I already
Hmm.
knew that after I quit, I wanted to go move to another country,
Hmm.
probably a city that's more affordable than Los Angeles, because I wanted to recover and not work so much. I met my now wife my first time in Brazil too, which was great, obviously, and did the talk. And the Brazilian fans are absolutely amazing. Not just the people, but the actual like machines too. They're very good too. It's so hot here, but
Hmm.
sorry, that was a weird segue. Um, but yeah, like this, by far the most passionate gamers I've ever experienced is in Brazil. And you hear that
Hmm.
about Latin Americans in general, but they're just such a dedicated group. And so one thing I'll say that is if you don't if you're marketing your game, don't ignore Brazil. It's
Hmm.
the fifth biggest gaming country as far as population. 82% of Brazilians are playing games.
Wow.
That includes, yeah, that includes mobile too.
Hmm.
And what else we have? I actually pulled up some stats here to share just to kind of show what's happening here, at least in the numbers wise. We just had Gamescom Latam last year.
Hmm.
It was big festival, and I think Gamescom in Germany realized, hey, let's not ignore this huge market, and so they got together at Gamescom Latam. There was over 100,000 visitors from 70 countries,
Hmm.
124 exhibitors, 700 studios, 200 publishers, and the reach was about 120 or so million people. Um,
Wow.
it's I think as far as revenue, Brazil's number 8 or 9.
Hmm.
Because obviously they don't have the money that say Germany or England has, but they have a lot of people playing games that are willing to spend money. Um, it's the issue with Brazil is that they've never really had much opportunity to go AAA, which I wouldn't say is an issue, but it's good to have AAA and indie in a country.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that's changing. I mean, Epic just bought Aquarius, who does Horizon Zero Chase,
Hmm.
kind of a arcadey racing game. And so Epic purchased the company down here, and so I think they have their first official, AAA studio. But you have a lot of companies here that are working on AAA games. They're just not the studio that's in charge. There's
Hmm.
a huge plethora of art talent in here in Brazil. And so if you're looking to hire anyone outside the country, I totally recommend looking at Brazil. Just don't do what some people or what some companies do, where they're like, okay, what's the exchange rate? Okay, it's 1 to 5. All right, let's pay him 20%. Don't do that. Because here's the thing: you could hire someone in Brazil at a life-changing amount and still save like a significant amount of money. That
Hmm.
relationship works really well between studios and devs here, assuming they choose
Yeah.
to do it. Right? If you just look at the exchange rate and then say I'm going to pay someone 20% or pay them basically what they get in Brazil, you're not
Hmm.
going to have happy people. Hire people.
You're not going to have high quality either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think it's a great opportunity for um, game studios to not only get great talent but also make people extremely happy with what they're getting paid
Mm.
here.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, it's been really exciting to watch the Latin American game scene expand. One of our we have a couple companies that we work with on a regular basis, and Exola is one of those companies. We have a few reps there that we hang out with a lot. And
oh,
Alessandro, yeah,
okay.
exactly, yeah. Just about to mention him. We work with him a ton, and he's the Latin American vice president. We also, speaking of bringing on great talent, our head of marketing at the Indie Game Academy is Venezuelan, not Brazilian, but still Latin American. And yeah,
Living in Venezuela still, or
yeah,
did
living in Venezuela, yes. But he actually went up to Gamescom Latam just a couple months ago. Um, and we're only able to pay our whole team right now is still part time. And yet, despite that, that's his entire livelihood, and he's able to support his family, including children, on that rate, because he's over in a cheaper country. And so he's dedicated to us, and we love him, and he works great and does a lot of really cool stuff for us. So yes, finding talent in Latin American countries would hugely echo that sentiment, and really just anywhere outside of the typical places. India is another really strong up and comer with a lot of really good talent. Um, I'm curious how you. I think what a lot of listeners are going to be most excited or interested to hear about is releasing to the Brazilian market and how that might work for them. Do you have any thoughts on that, especially for the indie devs, since that's our primary
Yeah,
listener?
I mean, this is the obvious one, but I'm really surprised at how many games don't translate to Brazilian Portuguese. And
Mm,
honestly, you don't have to translate to Portuguese because um, the population over there is, I want to say, like 20 million, and you have like 220 million people here, right? And
mm-hmm.
in fact, in Portugal, a lot of the kids, like most of the YouTubers they watch, are Brazilian, right? And so Portugal is way more heavily influenced by Brazil now than the other way around, you know?
Mm,
Um, so first off, get really good localization. Don't just find someone that just is going to use Google Translate or ChatGPT. Although ChatGPT is quite impressive, I use it over Google Translate now. I think, um, you know, get a very good translation. Try to get involved in whether it's online, if you can, the in-person events. But there's plenty of online festivals and
mm-hmm.
events, and they're very welcoming to non-Brazilian companies to show their games. Hold on, there's a spider here. There's
Oh
so many
no.
insects because I live in the forest in the mountains.
Yeah,
Um,
I lived in. I'm out of there now, but I lived in Georgia for a while in the U.S., and it is a rainforest.
yeah, we have these spiders called Brazilian wandering spiders, and they get to be like this big, and they're more deadly than a brown recluse and a
Oh
black
no.
widow. And if they bite you and you're a male, they function as Viagra, which is very strange. So they're studying these spiders. A lot of stuff studied in
But they're still
Brazil to
deadly, or is that the only effect?
no, you will have a forced open casket. Um,
Okay. Goodness.
they're
Yeah.
very deadly. Yeah. So
hmm Wow.
um,
Well, fascinating. I've heard of for releasing to Brazil, one of the things that I have done in the past myself, or just releasing to any country for that matter, is limiting as much text as possible. That has to be done really in the ideation or concept phase, and not all games are going to be able to do that. A lot of games rely on a lot of text. But that's one of the things I've seen before, where you rely on iconography absolutely as much as possible. Your menu is mostly icons with maybe a single piece of text, so you can cut down on how much localization there actually is. Is localization the only consideration for launching to a Latin American country?
I would say, target your online ads
hmm
as well. Make sure obviously Steam page is huge. Make sure you
hmm
have a well curated Steam page. If there's anything that I guess uniquely resonates with the Brazilian community, you might even change your Steam page over the English version. For the game that we've been working on, Martial Arts Tycoon Brazil, it's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu management tycoon game. You actually start out, your character is from this favela community, Morro Santo Amaro, which is the community that I live next to for a couple, close to 2 years, my first time in Brazil. Um,
Oh.
and you start there, and as you gain more money, you open up gyms in more wealthier parts of the city. And so for this game, it's really easy to get Brazilians excited because Brazilians haven't had very good representation in the media, right? You talk to
Mm,
most Americans, not just Americans, Canadians, Europeans, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to go to Brazil. I might get shot or stabbed, or they're afraid that they're gonna get robbed."
mm,
And I'm like, it's like any big, Rio or Sao Paulo. It's like going to one of the major cities in the U.S. There's just areas you shouldn't go, and use your
mhm.
street smart. Yeah, there is technically a higher risk of being robbed or whatnot, but in general, it's not something that should prevent you from coming to the country. You're more likely to be
Right.
robbed where you live, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and also the movies. You think about, okay, there's typically you ask people, hey, actually, I'll ask you, Willem, like, can you think of any Brazilian movies you've seen?
Not really. I'll be
Or
totally honest.
audience, type it out. Can you think of
Brazilian
one
movies
Brazilian?
audience. We have somebody with a Brazilian or a Portuguese, excuse me, wife. Oh no, yeah, Brazilian wife in the comments. So You must have seen some Brazilian movies,
Okay,
Andre.
so well, the Brazilian, she's gonna think of other films, but in general, what you find is people have seen Cidade de Deus, which is City of God. I'm not sure if you've seen that
Hmm.
before. Really good film. And
Hmm.
then Tropa de Elite, which is Elite Troop. It's a really good action film, and both are based around favelas, right? And so as a result, the people from other countries that see these films, they think that favelas are just full of drug dealers and police that are
Hmm.
constantly shooting at each other. And this is a huge issue and a problem. I'm not saying that it's not, but like any poor community, you go there and you're like, okay, well, the vast, vast, vast majority of people are just trying to make it. And
Yeah, just people.
there's a larger minority of people doing bad things, but in general, the vast
Hmm.
majority of people are good people and they're trying to survive.
Hmm.
Um, and so living two streets next to Morro Santo Amaro, I learned a lot of my Portuguese in this Boteco, like a small bar. And a lot of the people that work there, lived in the favela. A lot of my friends were from this community. And so I got to actually know people from there. And as a result, I actually kind of, my Portuguese ended up, I learned it'd almost be like if a Brazilian went to like Inglewood or Compton and learned their, learned their English there, and they don't realize that they're speaking different, you know. And so I
You've got like
learned
an
that
accent
while
now.
I didn't realize that I sounded kind of like, I guess an English kind of gangster.
Hmm.
um, but the big thing that I took away from that is like, wow, these people have really horrible representation, as in particular
Hmm.
outside of the U.S. because of the media that they've consumed that's Brazilian, and even
Hmm.
I'm partly responsible because of Modern Warfare 1 or 2, where we had the favela level. That's what it was. There was drug dealers and there was some military types, and that's all you saw, right? Um,
Wow.
so one of the main focuses for this game is to give proper representation to those people, and not
Yeah.
just show up, take some photos, and make these beautiful, gritty environments.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's true about games is how well they can like highlight different experiences and bring different experiences to different people. You're making me think. My brain is in the India market right now since I'm about to head over there. Uh, but I have a good friend who runs a company called Masala Games, and they're building their first IP right now called Detective Dotson. Everybody should check it out. It's actually really cool. But regardless, when I first played his demo, it's really more or less just a pretty straightforward detective game, but he does a phenomenal job, and their team does a phenomenal job of highlighting Indian culture. When you finish the very first detective mission, you do a little like a dance. You're basically part of an actual Indian wedding, and it really feels like I'm in the Indian culture, and that I think both does well in the Indian market, makes them feel more seen, and then it also brings that to non-Indian markets like the United States. Um, the concept of representation in general is something that I think is a great takeaway here as well, where you can definitely localize your game to be a part of the Latin American market, but you can also directly build a game for that market, and that probably is far more powerful.
Awesome. Yeah, and we also, I probably should have sent some videos, but one of the cooler things that we did, it was more of an experiment to see how well this would go over with a larger community. Assuming we launch our game and it's super successful or just kind of successful
Hmm.
too. Is I put together a GoFundMe and we raised $3,000 to buy kimonos for 4 different jiu-jitsu social projects.
Oh, awesome!
One which as I was leaving, actually had to use jiu-jitsu on the street. That's another story. um,
We'll talk about it next
and
episode.
so these 4 social projects, this is actually one of them.
Hmm.
And because, obviously in any community, especially in ones that are more poor, there's a lot of opportunity to get into things that are not good for you. And so you see
Hmm.
a lot of these gyms pop up that are basically free for kids as long as they don't get into selling drugs, right? And so we had donations. We got a bunch of kimonos in Brazil at cost from this company, Brazil Combat, that was very generous. And then Shoyo Roll, which is a premium brand in the United States, donated I think like about 15. And so it was cool to go out there and see like these kids. And it's funny is I always thought that you go into favela, you talk to these kids, they don't have any consoles, they don't play games because they don't, can't afford it.
Hmm.
But no, like almost all of them play games, and not you're probably thinking, oh, on their phone, right? No, like they buy like PlayStation 3s, you know, and so they're playing like FIFA 12, you know. And so what's interesting is how these communities keep these older consoles alive, you know,
Yeah.
because by the time there's two more generations, it's super cheap to pick up a PlayStation, you know, 2 or 3.
Kind of interesting. Like you could look into post-releasing games for old consoles, maybe. All right, so it is. We've got 9 minutes left to the episode, and I want to make sure we got time for at least one or two community questions. There's a great one here from Larry Mendez. Larry asks, Chance, would you say that for Brazilians who are new game designers, should they aim for the international market, or is it better that they explore the Brazilian market?
I mean, if they're new at game development, they're still kind of getting their foot in the door. They're, you know, maybe a few years into it or so.
Hmm.
I would go for whatever you can get at that point. I mean, you might have a better chance in Brazil at first,
Hmm.
but as soon as you build those skills up and you know build a larger network, you're going to have more opportunities to work internationally. Is
Hmm.
also I will mention that there was some law just passed maybe 6 months ago or so that now counts video games as basically as art according to the government, and so um, I think let me see if I have the number written down. There's now 360 million US dollars or 2 billion reais that is available for grants within the game industry now, which is great. So that's going to spur some growth here. But honestly, as a new game developer, your biggest concern is getting really good at whatever you do, right? And the rest will follow.
Hmm. And actually
Um,
releasing your game. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, right with the last year or so, it's been a really rough ride for the industry. Um,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to I think engineers are kind of the hardest to come by. So if you're an engineer, you know, focus on that, and you'll probably have the highest chance of getting hired as an engineer or an artist, you know, outside of Brazil, at least from my experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd say focus just more on getting your first job or your second job, and the rest hopefully will follow.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. It seems to basically always do better when you are earlier in your career to release to a smaller market because you can build something better for that group, for that community. Niching yourself seems to mostly only help those who are getting started. So I would say I would agree. I would release it to Brazil first, and then once you're a little bit more experienced, you can try the international market. Or if your game is doing well in Brazil, then you bring it to a wider market. Awesome. I've got two more questions for you. Felipe on LinkedIn asks, I'm studying data to work with games projects. How do you use data in your game projects, Chance?
How do I use data? Like, it's such to
Hmm.
me, it's kind of a general question. I'm trying to think
Hmm. Very
the
wide.
context of which they're asking, because all of your code is data. You know, like I'm trying to figure out a little more they can
I
clarify.
think probably they're talking about like analytics then. Um,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
how do you pilot your project a little bit more with analytics?
I mean, this is my first indie game that I've worked on, and you know, we haven't really dug into analytics yet because we're not really quite at that point. In fact, unfortunately, we had to kind of pause development for a while to stop to raise money, and hopefully, that's gonna
Mm.
be picking up this month, and we can get back at it. Um, you know, for me personally, I went to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu subreddit, and you know, Jiu-Jitsu is interesting because a combination of these people that look like they're Incredible Hulk and like extreme nerds, you know, and a lot that are on the other end of the spectrum, and they're fighting each other, right? And Jiu-Jitsu is
Hmm.
very technical, and so people that typically wouldn't succeed at sports like myself can analyze Jiu-Jitsu, approach it technically, and actually beat someone or do well against someone that you would think would just absolutely dominate them. And so as a result, um, it's it's there's a lot of people that will post studies and data on kind of like what moves work and what percentage chance, you know, maybe like 70% of the time I went for this sweep, it was successful, right? And you can dig into all kinds of data about jujitsu, and so I took some of that as a way for us to approach our combat system, you know. But as far as the analytics go, I don't think we're really at a point where that's something that we've really focused on.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. For to maybe answer the question then a little bit more broadly, I mean, there's, like you said, there's so many different ways that analytics and data get used in game development. So it's hard to just be like, here you go. Um, but maybe high level is we tend to use data for sort of marketing or market analysis, which is a bit of what you're talking about, going to different subreddits and communities and trying to figure out what they're interested in and what they're excited in. We tend to use data for like gameplay iterations, so we can see where people are getting stuck. How much money are people earning on an average gameplay? What do they have in their inventory? That kind of data can really help sort of polishing the game. And then we tend to use data too as like viability measures. So when we're trying to get investment, when we're trying to get stakeholders to agree to our design or whatever, we'll pull data that helps us prove that we're right, hopefully, anyway. All right, I've got one more question. This is the hardest one. It'll be really difficult for you, Chance. Are you ready?
All right.
Petunia says, what's your favorite food in Brazil?
Sorry, you just cut out. It's probably my internet. What's my favorite what?
Okay. What's your favorite food in Brazil?
It's hard to say. So I would say that Brazil has probably the best pizza that I've ever had in my life,
Hmm.
even compared to Italy. They also have some of the most sacrilegious pizza as well, putting ketchup on pizza. So there's a huge spectrum there. Yeah, catupiry. Yeah, catupiry is an amazing cheese. It's almost like a gooey or cream cheese. And actually, sometimes my first time, or actually my second time back to Brazil, I was asking this waiter, I was like, I want pizza with this cheese. It's Kate, like Queijo Katy Perry, and no catupiry. And so I posted something on Reddit about that on our Brazil like many years ago. It ended up being like the third biggest post. The Katy Perry cheese meme became a meme. But anyways, that cheese is amazing. Carne seca, which is kind of a dried beef with aipim, which is also I think yuca in the United States. Um, what else we got here? Oh, acai. Can't forget that. That's a great kind of post jujitsu food. So there's a few. There's not like one. There's
Hmm.
a few, and it's really grown on me. The food here, I usually eat really spicy, Thai, and so I came here and I was like a little like, it's not much spices, but it's really good, not very spicy food. And if you go to the north, there's actually moqueca, which is also one of my favorites. Has more spices in the north, near like Venezuela and whatnot. So yeah, that's a hard question to answer.
Nice. I mean, you gave us a good answer. All right. So we have to wind down for the day. This has been a really interesting conversation. I loved learning more about the history of the game industry and then also talking here about moving into Latin American countries. Before we say goodbye, though, we like to do two things here. We like to assign some homework. Um, and that is something that the audience can do in the next week or so. That'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today. So, can you think of some homework for us, Chance?
Yeah, I would say, you know, check out some Brazilian indie games. See what the Brazilians are making. One game I can recommend is a JRPG style or BRPG. I don't know what you call it. Called Tropicalia, and it's kind of you play as an indigenous character within the Amazon, and it's very classic kind of NES, SNES kind of style graphics. Let me see here. Check out Super Bafo Championship. Um,
I'm dropping the link
what's
to
the game?
Tropicalia in the chat. It looks cool.
And super powerful capybaras. I think I might have the adjectives wrong. Um, Mega super powerful capybaras. I'm trying to remember how many adjectives are before the capybaras, but capybaras are quite possibly the best thing here in Brazil. So if you haven't checked out the game, at least check out the animal. Albatross is another indie game here in Brazil. Bloodless. We've got. Let me see. I got a couple more on my list here that I wanted to mention. Lip Sync Killers and Feelings. So there's some names for you to check out. They're very indie projects. So if you
Mhm.
like very indie games, that's what you're going to get. Small teams, but a lot of creativity behind them.
That's awesome. All right, I'm gonna modify it. That's a great piece of homework. I'm gonna modify it the slightest bit because I like to force people to actually do it. I want you to pick at least one. Definitely play more than one, but I want you to pick one indie game, play the thing, and then do a 3-paragraph write-up on that game. So a little bit of like a case study. What works about the game? What do you think could be improved about the game? What can you learn from playing that game? And then post that to LinkedIn for us. You can tag us, the Indie Game Academy. You can also tag Chance, as well as myself, Willem. And if you're not feeling like sharing publicly, that's cool. There is a Indie Game Lunch Hour channel here in the Discord. You can also share it in. All right. That is a fantastic piece of homework. I'm going to go play some Brazilian games myself. Before we say goodbye, Chance, is there any last words of wisdom you want to share or anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the episode?
If you could do me a huge favor and go on Steam and wishlist Martial Arts Tycoon Brazil. You can also find us on some socials. Um, we have a Discord. You could probably Google that. You know, and yeah, most of the wish lists are highly appreciated, and hopefully we'll get back to full development by the end of this year.
Amazing. I am wishlisting it as we speak. I have clicked the button.
And
I've also
check out
dropped
the
it in
trailer.
chat.
I think you'll find the teaser trailer is nice, and there's a little gameplay preview as well. You can find that on YouTube.
Fantastic. Awesome. We will drop links to all of that down below, so check it out. Chance, thank you so much for being here. This has been really enlightening.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for showing
Absolutely.
up.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for asking your questions, and thank you for listening. As always, if you enjoyed, we ask that you send it along to just one other person who may enjoy it too. All right. We'll see you again next week at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Feel free to swing by and join us for the next one. There's links to join the Discord down below. Goodbye, everybody. Take care.